my brain always says, what's the worst that can happen? But what if you say, what's the best that can happen by reaching for that donut? What's the best?
Hello, everyone. I am Melissa Forziat of Take the Doughnut, here to help you get inspiration and get donuts. I'm a motivational keynote speaker, and today I'm bringing you a Take the Doughnut interview with Lisa Varga. And Lisa is the executive director of the Virginia Library Association, as well as Library Journal's Librarian of the Year for 2024. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It is such a pleasure to talk with you. And before we get into any more serious questions, I have to ask you the obligatory donut question to start with. What is your favorite donut?
Apple cider donut from Delicious Orchards in Colts Neck, New Jersey.
It's so specific and it's so wonderful.
with a cup of warm cider on a fall day. It's just such a childhood memory, and one that I've carried into adulthood. When I get back there, I always make a point to get some.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I haven't specifically had an apple cider donut before, so I need to see if I can find something somewhere near me.
If not, Delicious Orchard ships. So,
Oh, all of my problems are solved.
yes, you may have to wait for fall, but yes, they do ship. And you'll add some cookies and brownies to your box. It'll be delightful. And it's an orchard, so they do actually have fruits and vegetables. I'm focused on the baked goods.
That's also my focus. Like, oh, actual fruits and vegetables. It's amazing. But I'm not as excited about that, I've noticed, as with the donut that you mentioned. Okay, excellent. Well, I said just a little bit about you to start with, but I know there's plenty more to say. So what should we know about you? Tell us more about yourself.
So I am sort of an accidental association professional. I got my master's degree in library science about 25 years ago, but I haven't actually worked in a library in a long time. My goal and purpose at the association is to provide support for library staff and librarians around the state who work in public or even academic college libraries, and also uphold the principles of the First Amendment and the free to read. And
Okay.
that was just sort of a thing we did for a number of years, but the last few years have just been very chaotic in this role. And for librarians across the country, whether they're in schools or public or academic libraries.
Tell me more about that, the chaos
Well,
behind it all.
sure. I think there's been sort of a focus on, it started out with education, right? And this fabrication of CRT being taught in classes, critical race theory being taught to elementary or secondary school kids. And then we had the pandemic and just sort of this political divide getting much sharper and stronger. And there became a deliberate attack on books, and specifically books contained in libraries and school libraries that some people disagreed with. And the argument has changed over the course of the last couple of years, but the goal has still been the same, which is to erase the lived experiences of LGBTQIA plus and BIPOC individuals. So those stories are being suppressed, challenged, requested for removal, sometimes in a process that doesn't take the First Amendment into consideration. And that's vitally important to those of us who have taken on the role of working in public libraries, working in public service, making sure that information is available to people regardless of their economic status, and that they can find whatever they're looking for.
Wow, what a huge process project time that is. It sounds like it
Yeah.
really has been a major focus.
It has been. I think, libraries are historically known as really great stewards of tax dollars. And now we're being asked to spend dozens of hundreds of hours adjudicating things that we already, as experienced professionals, have made decisions about. That is being called into question and then being retaliated against by perhaps the suppression of funds for libraries or even the closing of some school libraries. We've seen in Florida last year where kids came back to school and their teachers' libraries that they had collected and curated over the years were suddenly no longer allowed to be viewed or explored by the kids. It's really been a difficult time for people.
What a unique viewpoint you have into sort of the cultural zeitgeist.
Yes.
Like what we're reading is what we're thinking. So, and what we're not allowed to read is what we're not allowed to think, right? So it's just really interesting to hear from sort of the front line of that situation.
Yeah.
This conversation is all about sort of the opportunities that life affords you. And I think sometimes opportunities don't come out of the greatest situations. And so it's like, I do wonder all of the things that this situation has brought up for you in the last few years as you've been working on it. Like, how has that evolved over time? And I'm really interested to explore that in a conversation like this, both in terms of that particular subject, but also more broadly with your life. I'll reset this for people who haven't heard me talk before or done haven't seen an interview with me before. Basically, take the donut for me is an expression that means carpe diem. It's the same thing as, going after what you want in life. And it comes from this really strange thing that happened for me in college where I left an actual donut on a table, but it became an object lesson for me and what it looks like to leave opportunities behind. So for me, it's all about doing the opposite of that, going after what I want, taking the donut. And I'll link a video here for those who want to hear the full origin story. But this conversation really is a focus of really what does it look like when we go after the things that we want in life. So I'd love to ask, as we get started with that topic, how are you with going after goals? What is that process like for you?
Well, I've thought a lot about this since we first connected. And I think the Take the Doughnut moment for me happened in about 2017, 2018, where the American Library Association was starting something called the Policy Corps, and they were selecting people from around the country to work on policy issues related to libraries. And so I applied to be part of this corps because I was at a point in my life where my kids were getting a little older. I was feeling like I had a real handle on the job that I was doing, and I could devote more of my volunteer time to this cause. And I live in Virginia Beach. I'm not very, very far from DC. I can get there very frequently if I need to, and felt like, let me take this opportunity to learn more about how the legislative process impacts libraries. And I applied for it and was selected, and it was an incredible growth opportunity for me. And the experience there led me to be more prepared when the intellectual freedom challenges started to come in full force here in Virginia and across the country.
It's amazing how things are so connected. Sometimes in the moment, it doesn't feel like you're heading on a linear path. And then you look back and you're like, oh, this was all setting me up for a particular thing.
Absolutely. Seeing now the media training I got from that, the ability to connect with more of my colleagues from across the country in various roles, and then to have the wording, the phrasing, the confidence to speak up for those who need folks to speak up for them, really gave me, it opened my eyes to a lot of things. I recognized a long time ago that, as a cis white lady, heterosexual, like I had a lot less vulnerability than a lot of other people. And in my job, I have a lot less vulnerability than your average library worker, library staffer. And so I speak up. I go to school board meetings. I go to legislative sessions and speak at the General Assembly. I try to make a difference for people, knowing that libraries have saved so many lives. Books have inspired so many people.
It seems like in a more broad, more general way, when an opportunity is in front of you, you kind of just, it's almost not a thought. It's just like you rush right in and you make sure that you're moving forward with it and developing yourself and the people around you.
I think that's a really good way to assess it. I don't necessarily have vision board or mood board or something that drives me. It's just that when I see injustice and I know that I can make a difference, I've done that. And what ended up happening was that because of my situation, my phone number got passed around to a lot of librarians and library staffers around the country, and I became I jokingly called it intellectual freedom therapist, where people would call me late at night after they'd put their kids to bed and just cry because of how hard their job gotten, how they'd been derailed from doing their actual work, and how much this hurt, to be attacked, to be called terrible words, to be accused of doing something like grooming or indoctrinating, when that is not at all what libraries are about. And so being that support for those people and just listening to them became very important to me.
Yeah, and it all kind of stems from this moment of saying yes to an opportunity within, the policy world.
Yes,
And
100%.
the skills that gave you led to this, and who knows what some of those connections that you've made during that time of the people who were leaning on you, who knows what that would lead to for you down the road.
Yes.
So, one of the things that I wonder is when you're going after something that's really big, like some of the things that you've been going after, what keeps you motivated? And I wonder if you even see it in a way that's linear enough to say, okay, here's a goal that I'm going after. I'm trying to aim for it and I have to stay motivated. Or if it is just for you, like getting up every day and seeing what's on the to-do list. But when you think about motivation, what does that look like for you? How do you stay motivated?
It has a couple of different prongs. And I'll say that, I've mentioned the First Amendment a couple of times, right? And that is really important for the freedom to read. The Constitution is of vital importance to me, not just as an American, but also because my late husband was a commander in the United States Navy. And he took an oath to the Constitution every time he had a promotion in his career. Knowing that I have a small role in helping to enforce and honor him in that way is something that's really important to me. Also, I want to make sure that I use my time on this earth in a way that benefits others. It's one of those, you plant a tree not for you, but for the generations ahead. It's the same thing with a library. Ensuring that a library is there makes sure that people for generations have access.
It's beautifully said. And I'm sorry for your loss as well. Sounds like there was a deeper meaning in all of this for you.
There is, and it's taught me a lot of things. As I was looking through just some information about your podcast, I was thinking about, like, what's the hardest thing that I have had to deal with, right? And I think asking for help is one of those things that was a result of his death. Prior to him dying, I think just asking for help was just not something I did. And then I realized when I saw my community coming out to support me and my sons, and when I saw that people were willing to do things if you ask them, it became easier for me to ask for help, not just in my personal life, but professionally as well. And so I think the key thing with this whole fight against intellectual freedom is that none of us can do it alone, and we are all stronger together.
I was going to ask the question of, like, is there a particular brand of challenge that comes up for you when you go after things that you want that just keeps rearing its head? It sounds like that might be it for you. The idea of asking for what you want, I relate to that as well. That feeling of, oh, I'm going to go it alone. Like, a lot of times I don't even think about asking others for help unless I kind of have listened to a few of these interviews, hearing people tell me to do it. But sometimes it takes that reminder. But would you say that's the biggest challenge for you along the way?
Asking for help, admitting I need help is probably the biggest challenge that I would say. When I look back at my earlier career, I was so willing to take on everything and not have to bother people that I probably made some folks feel excluded when I wasn't trying to do that. I was just trying not to bother them. And that's not a great lesson. because people want to have input. People want to share their ideas and thoughts and experience to help further change, or even just, and not even further change, but just even to get a task done. Every year I plan a conference for the Virginia Library Association. So every year I throw a wedding, basically. But there are parts of that are my strong suit and parts of it that aren't. And so I have to ask people to assist me with things.
It's a good reminder that, okay, maybe you can do something on your own. That's all well and good, but how are you actually making other people feel in that process is something to bear in mind as you go through it.
Yes.
So when you think about historically the biggest opportunities you've taken in life, personally or professionally, what would you say is the biggest donut you've ever taken?
Oh gosh, this is a really good question. I think the biggest donut was asking the person who had this job before me if they would consider me for the role, because I was working in a library in another part of Virginia at the time. My husband had been given a position here in the Norfolk area, and I was going to have to leave my job. And my boss at the time said, "Oh, you should talk to Linda. She's thinking of retiring." And I thought, that seems like a really crazy thing to say to someone. Hey, are you thinking of retiring? I'd like your job. And I ended up having a moment with this woman, and I said, "I've heard that you're thinking of this. I'd love to be considered." And within a couple of weeks, months, I was given this opportunity to work at this level in a position that I've turned into something larger than it was when I found it. Our membership was about 800 or so librarians and library staff each year. I reconfigured the model. We now have more than 5,000 members. And that has led to a lot more representation, a lot more involvement, a lot more momentum for the organization. And the whole goal here is knowing that libraries contribute to the public good. What can we do to sustain that and enhance it as time goes on? If anyone listening hasn't been to their public library in a long time, I would suggest visit. And if reading physical books isn't your thing, download an app called Libby. Listen to books for free.
This
Sorry,
is
I don't
your
mean
sign.
to
No, this is great. This is your sign. This is the conversation that you needed to hear today. I've been thinking a lot more recently about how sometimes when we take a donut of our own and when we ask for help and we ask for the support that we need to get there, sometimes we think it's like an imposition or an awkwardness that we're creating with the other person, but you never know if like you're creating an opportunity for them to take a donut too. So I think about this very moment that you had with, I think you said Linda was her name. I think about this moment and it's like, oh, should I say, I know you're thinking about retiring and then I kind of want that job. But,
right.
And that could be weird and awkward in one scenario, but in another scenario, maybe Linda was hoping for somebody who would be like a person that could take her place, who could like, she could pass the baton to. Right. And maybe that's something she was looking for. You just never know. And, to have that conversation is the only way that you can find out.
Absolutely. And making yourself vulnerable in that way too. Like, she could have just said, "No, I'm not thinking of retiring." And "Oh, okay, sorry, that was a miscommunication." That's it. And it would have been fine.
Yeah. And now and now you're in the role. So I mean, there you have it, only because you were able to initiate that conversation. I'm curious if there's a donut that's currently in progress for you. And it might be that you've been touching upon it along the way in some of your previous answers, but what donut do you want to take right now?
Right now, I want to use the opportunity I've been given with this Librarian of the Year thing, which is how you found me, right? This gift that my friends gave me by nominating me and that Library Journal bestowed upon me by choosing me to help people understand the importance of the library in their communities. Because I think that with the advent of the internet and cell phones and all that other stuff, people really think like, "Oh, I have all the information I need in my pocket." And the reality of that is, if you've ever tried to ask a question on the internet and you get slammed for all kinds of things you could have never perceived, just know that you can go to your library and ask that same question and they will find you the answer and they won't judge you for it. Their goal is to be able to like weed through the chaos to find you the source of the information that you need. And I look at, young parents today, young caregivers, books are expensive, right? And if your kids are into books, go to the library. It's like the one place you can go and say yes when they ask, can we take this home? I remember being a young mom living on a budget, and I had 3 kids. Every time we went into any store, it was just me saying no, no, no. But the library, fill a bag. All we have to do is remember to take it back. And if we don't take it back, even now at this point, not a lot of libraries are charging fines for late items. And so it's really meant to be for people for every stage of their life. And there are parts of your life where you may not feel like you need the library, but you will in the future. If you go into one these days, you will see people of all ages using those services. And it's not just checking out books. We've got libraries that check out telescopes or have maker spaces and 3D printers. The library here in Virginia Beach circulates surfboards and pickleball kits. The goal being that some of these things have barriers to entry, these recreational things. Let's take that barrier down.
I love that you're giving people a lot of room to pursue their own opportunities here with everything that you're saying. And I want to take a second to turn this focus to the people who are listening. So there may be some people who are listening who have a donut of their own that they want to take, and they're not sure what the next step is. So let's sprinkle some encouragement. And, what would you say to those people who they've got a donut that they want to take, they just don't know what the next step is?
I'm going to say, I took this from someone, and their name escapes me at the moment, but my brain always says, what's the worst that can happen? But what if you say, what's the best that can happen by reaching for that donut? What's the best? And I think that helps to reframe not only your attitude about the donut, but how you go about asking for it, take it, reaching for it. What's the best that can happen if I do this?
Oh, that's beautifully said. For those of us who want to follow you in your journey, it seems like there's a lot of different aspects that could be of interest to people to follow this journey. Where can we find you or the organizations that you work for?
Sure. The best way to find me is on LinkedIn at Lisa Varga. Hopefully we can put a link in. And I'd encourage everyone to visit Unite Against Book Bans, which is a coalition of people who are coming together to help save you time by creating toolkits, social media shares, that sort of thing, instructions about how to maybe speak up for your public library or for your school librarians. We're at a tipping point right now where I think the middle majority is really the people we need to start speaking up and fighting for us, because it's really getting outrageous. We're having complaints about fabric choices, about words in the dictionary, things along those lines that are getting egregious. And just knowing that libraries contribute to the public good is something that we want to reinforce.
Oh, thank you for sharing all that. I'll make sure to put links in the description so people can find those resources more easily. Everybody be sure to check those out. And if you liked this conversation, be sure to like and subscribe on this video, because there's so many inspirational interviews still to come that just give us a window into different people's worlds. In the meantime, thank you so much, Lisa, for taking some time and talking with me about going after the things that you want in life and what that really looks like.
Sure. And thank you, everyone who's listening. I mean, it shows that you're taking time to invest in you, and that means a lot.
Absolutely. Well, okay, everybody, you know what to do. Go out there, get inspiration, and get donuts. Bye, everyone.
Bye.